seem insane to ask the question, well, wait a minute, just how many blondes did get into Harvard last year? Right? Like just that, like, I mean, like who are you that you could possibly care? Right? Like who's going to get out of bed tomorrow morning with that moral and political project? Right? How do we get there with respect to race? That's the riddle I think we need to solve. But the first impediment to solving that riddle are all the people who think it would be um, it's just politically inadmissible to even have that as a goal, right? They don't even aspire to get to some kind of race blind utopia, right? Like it's not even that wouldn't even be utopia. That would be a bad outcome on their account. And the people who feel this way are, on the far right, real racists, what real white supremacists who say that the moral differences and political differences between people are in fact indelible and are right to be drawn at the skin. And the people on the far left, the far left identitarians who think that it really matters what race you are. I mean, these people have to either be convinced or overruled, right and left, and that's a massive political project.
Let me see if I can imagine what they're thinking, because I agree with you that we should be in a world where these things are given less credence. They're thinking about history. First of all, they suspect the person who invites this move. They think you're trying to change the subject. They want justice. They think that the racial disparities to which they will attend by doing the kind of bean counting that you and I might wish they wouldn't do, those disparities are a reflection of structures of domination and devaluation and whatnot. And they want justice. And they think that your effort to call the whole thing off, we had race for a few centuries. As the West came out of Europe and conquered the world, we had race. As we did a colonial thing and a slavery thing and whatnot, we had race. And now we get to the 21st century, we want to call the whole thing off. And they're saying, no, not so quick. My being counting is really in the service of a larger accountancy, a moral accountancy, which can't even be broached, let alone resolved without attention to the things you're telling me to disattend.
Well, that might be true in certain cases. I mean, that's why I consider myself confused around questions of affirmative action, right? Like, where are the places in our society where affirmative action still makes a lot of sense and is in fact necessary, and where are the places where it's obviously counterproductive? I mean, the devil is in the details there, and I'm open to argument in any specific case, and there's certainly places in our society where I think we're right to worry that something like structural racism is in fact true and problematic, and it needs to be dismantled. And then there are cases where we've obviously flipped it, and there's a structural racism that's working to the advantage of black and brown people and to the disadvantage of Asians, certainly, and whites. And this may be a controversial claim, it may be a blasphemous one, but I think it's probably true, certainly approximately true at this moment, that any truly desirable high status place in American culture now is more easily gotten to for people, black and brown people, provided the equivalent uh,
Yeah.
qualifications, which is to say that if you are getting great grades and you have great test scores and you're black, there is no door barred to you
Yeah.
in this society, and in fact, every door is wide open to you. Every door that you would want to go through. You take the top 20% of any corner of culture, whether it's journalism, academia, science, media, Hollywood, but just any place that you'd want to be,
Yeah.
where high status would accrue to you for being there. It is easier, not harder, if you're black at this moment. I would make that claim, and maybe there's some exception somewhere, but it's not. It's not at the Oscars. It's not in a writer's room in comedy in Hollywood. It's not It's certainly
Yeah, I
not
got
at
it.
Princeton, you know. And so,
No, it's
where
not.
is it?
It's not at a law firm, and it's not in medical school. It's not when you're running for office,
Right.
et cetera. So no, don't worry. I'm not the least bit offended, although I can imagine a lot of people will be offended. Sounds like that's not the first time you've made that declaration, though, Sam.
No, no,
It
I've
was
made that on my podcast at least once, and but it's
you
so.
got
But
some
what do we
flack
do with
for it.
that? Like, I'm not saying that's a bad thing, right? What I'm saying is lying about that is a bad thing. Driving people crazy with those lies is a bad
Well, we
thing.
tell the truth. What
You know?
what we do is we tell the truth. I want to say one final thing about affirmative action. Then I want to talk to you about God for a little bit.
Sure.
It's undignified for Black people to be reliant upon special dispensation in order to be included into the most valued venues in society as a permanent way of doing business going forward. That's not equality. That's being a ward. That's being a client. You're being taken care of. You're being covered for.
Mm.
I don't know how anybody with self-respect could be happy living in such a world. I think the corruption of the soul here, attendant to accepting special dispensation as if it were your right because of something that happened, not to you, not even to your parents, something that happened to your ancestors long since gone. You buy into a narrative of permanent injury, and then you walk around with your hand out expecting to be treated specially, afforded a special privilege as an entitlement, and you call that equality. That's not equality. So quite apart from, I think, the legitimate concerns that you raise about the dilemma of what brain surgeon to choose, or about the fact of favorable, not disfavorable discrimination is the norm in many venues of American society. There's something profoundly wrongheaded for Black people here
Mm.
about settling for affirmative action.
But what about using it as using race as a tiebreaker in cases of equally qualified people? Assuming
Okay,
diversity is,
but
is is intrinsically good, or that it's sane for an institution like Harvard to want as much of a representation of American society as they can get whilst keeping their standards high. Why not use race as
I,
a tiebreaker?
I think that's an easy case to which I can say yes, but I don't think it's very helpful because that happens almost never.
Mm, right.
I mean, tiebreaker is an event of equal qualification. Event of measure zero is the way the technicians would put it. Smooth distributions. I'm drawing at random. I've got two people. What's the likelihood that they're going to come out exactly the same? That's a low probability event.
Right.
But it's fine as far as it goes. I mean, you know, uh, I'm not talking about administrative practice or how to admit kids to college. I'm talking about politics. I'm talking about the large narrative of what is racial justice and what is equality. And I'm saying, I think, and this is just my view, I've developed it in some of my own writing. Development is the key. Performance is the
Mm,
key. Ability, mastery is the key. Preference, it's so 1970s. You know, I say the world is fast moving and it's changing. The Chinese are coming. Uh, Nothing is standing still. But Black people don't want to be in the position of being wards of uh, uh, pitying liberal establishment who think they are virtue signaling and standing on the right side of history by looking at other way at our mediocrity. We want to be players, real players. We want to be like the Jews.
mm. Well, actually,
What's wrong with that?
there's another point here, another moral paradox or apparent paradox, which I'm sure this is probably a point you've made before. I think I heard Coleman make it the first time I heard this. Uh, but
Coleman Hughes.
yeah, uh, who, despite his age, I have learned a lot from him. Talk about a precocious young man. But
He's a brilliant kid, no doubt,
yeah,
as you know. I understand you're a big booster of his.
yeah, yeah. But so he made the point that if affirmative action is good and it's and then morally necessary, why do we have to treat it as something that is ignominious when actually pointed out, right? Why couldn't they? Why why wouldn't we point to the students on our campuses who are affirmative action admittances and celebrate them as the test cases that are correcting this moral wrong, right?
Indeed.
It's obvious that it just doesn't run through to do that because no one, as you say, wants to be someone who got into their station for reasons other than their merits, right? And that's and
I
obviously we don't have a
actually
yeah. Go ahead.
no, I was to say, ironically, it's actually, I think, worse than that in a way. No one wants to be, you got to Yale Law School because of affirmative action. On the other hand, having gotten to Yale Law School, graduated, and risen to the federal bench, you might be heard to say, I'm a beneficiary of affirmative action and I'm proud of it.
Mm-hmm.
So people don't want anyone else to point out that they are beneficiaries of affirmative action, but then in
But then
defense
you
of
can only
affirmative
yeah,
action
yeah.
are quite prepared to crow about having been boosted by affirmative. So the discourse is just entirely dishonest
Mm.
around these issues, I think.